Okay, so I first read this book, The E-Myth Revisited, in 2019 after finishing medical school, and it took me from making around $100,000 a year in my business to now multiple millions each year. Now, I started my first successful business in 2013, 6 years before I read this book, and in those 6 years, I made literally every single mistake that he talks about in this book. Had I discovered it sooner, I would have avoided a lot of the pitfalls that I made the first time around. And according to the stats, apparently within the first 5 years, 80% of businesses will fail. But I genuinely think if you read and apply the insights from this book, that you are likely to have better odds than that. And so in this episode of Book Club, which is the ongoing series where for the last 4 years, I have been distilling and discussing highlights and summaries from some of my favorite books, we're going to talk about the 3 most important lessons from this book that truly kickstarted my journey to growing my business from 6 figures to multiple 7 figures. Oh, by the way, if you're new here, my name is Ali. I'm a doctor turned entrepreneur and writer, and the author of this book, Feel Good Productivity, which you can check out, link down below. But I would massively recommend reading this book, or at least watching the rest of this video and applying these insights if you are starting a business, no matter how big or small. Part 1, the story of Sarah. Okay, so the book opens with a story about an entrepreneur named Sarah. And Sarah, when she was a little girl, fell in love with the idea of baking pies. And this is a true story apparently, where Michael Gerber writes that her aunt had filled her family's kitchen, Sarah's childhood, with the delicious, sweet aroma of freshly baked pies. Her aunt had introduced her to the magic of the process, the kneading of the dough, the cleaning of the oven, the sprinkling of the flour, the preparation of the trays, the careful cutting of the apples, the cherries, the rhubarb, the peaches. It was a labor of love. And so Sarah falls in love with the process of baking pies. And then, when she's older, Sarah has a corporate job, which she absolutely hates. And all of her friends say, Sarah, you're so good at this baking pie thing. You should totally start a pie baking business. You should open a bakery. Sarah says, my very best friends told me I was crazy not to open a pie shop because I was so damn good at it. And what's worse, I believed them. I saw a way out of the horrible job I used to have. I saw a way to get free, doing work I love to do and doing it all for me. Ah, the classic desire to start a business. I love the idea of getting out of this job that I hate and starting this business where I can, in theory, do the thing that I love, which is baking pies, or whatever the thing that you love to do might be. And so Sarah opens the bakery. She rents out the bakery space. She buys all the ovens. She starts making the pies. She starts getting customers. And this is what happens when she meets the author of this book, Michael Gerber. The sweet, fresh aroma of pies filled the air. It was 7 a.m. and All About Pies was to open in 30 minutes. But Sarah's mind was someplace else. It's 7 o'clock, she said, wiping her eyes with her apron as though reading my mind. Do you realize I've been here since 3 o'clock this morning, and that I was up at 2 to get ready? And that by the time I get the pies ready, open for business, take care of my customers, clean up, close up, do the shopping, reconcile the cash register, go to the bank, have dinner, and get the pies ready for tomorrow's bake, it'll be 9:30 or 10 o'clock tonight. And by the time I do all of that, by the time any normal person, for God's sake, would say that the day was done, I will then also need to sit down and begin to figure out how I'm going to pay the rent next month. When I first read this, I had never related to something so hard in my life. My business was not in the business of baking pies. At the time, it was a business in the business of making courses and helping people get into medical school. But I could fully relate to everything that Sarah was saying of how this thing that you think you enjoy doing, because it's like a fun thing, whether it's teaching people or baking pies or making YouTube videos or writing software or making websites or whatever the thing might be that you enjoy doing, at the point where it becomes a business, you're running on this hamster wheel doing seemingly everything other than the thing that you actually set out to do. In my first business, I spent maybe 5% of my time actually teaching medical students, which was the thing I enjoyed doing, and 95% of my time dealing with trying to market the business, trying to figure out the logistics, trying to print the books, trying to create the materials, trying to deal with DHL deliveries. When I read this chapter about Sarah and her pie baking, I was like, holy shit, this book is for me, because I can vibe with all of this stuff. And the way the rest of the book is written is that the author, Michael Gerber, happens to pop into Sarah's shop, and she talks to him about all these problems that she's having in her business. And because this guy is a small business guru, i.e. a business coach, he then talks her through the whole process and helps her understand where she's going wrong and how she could be improving her business so that she can build the life that she loves, she can do what she loves, and also have a business that's thriving and successful. And so the whole thing is sort of written using this example of baking pies, but obviously it's a bit of a sort of analogy, parable, whatever the word is, and you can substitute baking pies for whatever your business happens to be. And so that leads us to key idea number 1, the triple threat. So if you were a baker and you knew the ins and outs of baking the best pies, would you also understand how to make a successful business that bakes and sells pies? Similarly, if you understand how to work out in the gym, do you then understand how to build a successful business around personal training? Or if in my case, you enjoy making YouTube videos, do you also then understand how to make a business that is built around creating YouTube videos and monetizing that? Okay, so the book is called The E-Myth, which stands for The Entrepreneurial Myth. It is a terrible title. I wish he'd called it something differently. But the entrepreneurial myth is the myth that most people who start businesses are entrepreneurs. They are entrepreneurs who maybe have lots of money, lots of skills, and they've got a great idea. They're like doing the thing. It's like, they are entrepreneurs. But this is a myth. This is not actually true. In reality, most people who start businesses are technicians. They enjoy the technical work of doing a thing, and then they decide to start a business where they're trying to monetize doing the thing. But instead of learning about business, the technician focuses on the skill of being the baker, and this is not the key to business success. The fatal assumption that an individual who understands the technical work of a business can successfully run a business that does that technical work. I'm going to say that again for emphasis. Just because you understand the technical work of a business does not mean you understand a business that does that technical work. And so that brings us to the first key idea here, which is the triple threat, where basically Michael Gerber argues, and this was the game-changing insight for me, that everyone who goes into business actually needs to be three people in one. Yes, you need to be the technician, but you also need to be the entrepreneur, and you also need to be the manager. Apologies if there's any background noise. We're in the middle of a heat wave here in London, and I have to open the windows, but there's freaking construction work and drilling happening, so hopefully it's not too audible through this microphone. But even if it is, hopefully you're enjoying this video anyway, and it's all good. Okay, so the entrepreneur is the visionary, the dreamer. The entrepreneur sees the opportunity and goes after it. We're thinking people like Steve Jobs. They generally have a tendency to bulldoze people and create havoc, and the entrepreneur lives in the future. Next up, we have the manager. The manager is pragmatic and organized, and they see problems. The manager keeps you grounded, and they translate the entrepreneurial vision into actions that actually move the business forward. The manager often runs after the entrepreneur to clean up the mess that the entrepreneur creates, and the manager solidifies the base of operations and tends to live in the past. And then of course we have the technician, who is the doer and the tinkerer. For the technician, thinking and strategy isn't actually the work. Thinking and strategy gets in the way of doing the work. The technician enjoys doing the work, and the technician lives in the present. Now, all three of these roles are equally important. In fact, as Michael says, the fact of the matter is that we all have an entrepreneur, manager, and technician inside us, and if they were equally balanced, we'd be describing an incredibly competent individual. The entrepreneur would be free to forge ahead into new areas of interest. The manager would be solidifying the base of operations, and the technician would be doing the technical work. Each would derive satisfaction from the work he does best, serving the whole in the most productive way. Unfortunately, our experience shows that few people who go into business are blessed with such a balance. Instead, the typical small business owner is only 10% entrepreneur, 20% manager, and 70% technician. So the practical takeaway here is that you cannot just be a technician to build a successful business. You need to be the triple threat. You need to be the entrepreneur and also the manager and also the technician, kind of all at the same time. And there's nothing wrong with being just a technician, but there is something wrong with being a technician who also owns a business, because without the other two roles, the entrepreneur and the manager, you're going to be stuck in what he calls the Infancy Trap, which is the next key theme that we're going to talk about that really resonated with me back in 2019. And incidentally, one particularly important part of growing the business has been using great software and finding ways to automate things, which is where Make comes in, who are the sponsor of today's video. Now, Make is an incredibly versatile automation tool that connects everything from tasks and workflows to apps and systems, and that allows you to connect things together to build and automate pretty much anything. And it's all inside one powerful visual platform. Now, we're using Make for a bunch of different areas in the business. One big area that we use Make is in automating parts of our social media workflow. So by connecting our various apps with Notion, where we organize our content, we're able to pull in data from all of our various social platforms, and then we can see all of our analytics in one place, which gives us a clear overview without having to manually input stuff, which is what we were doing previously. So the way this works is that every day we've got a scheduled scenario running in Make that connects Instagram with Notion using Appify's Instagram scraper. The scraper collects up-to-date performance metrics for all of the reels that we've posted over the last week, and it includes key stats like views and reach and engagement. Now, these metrics, which are not easily accessible through Instagram's standard API, those then get automatically imported into our Notion database, and so that lets us see all of the top performing and worst performing Instagram reels, and that helps us quickly figure out what's working and what's not. Now, in the days before we started using Make, we would have to visit each social media's profile individually, and then we'd have to dig through the analytics and then manually enter all of that information into Notion or into a Google Sheet. And so for Stuff like that, where previously we were trying to get a real-life human to do the thing, makes automation systems have just been absolutely amazing in streamlining that workflow and saving us a lot of time. And the really cool thing about Make is that it basically unlocks the entire potential of your tech stack. Like whatever business you're running, you're probably using multiple apps and multiple systems, but Make sort of acts as the glue that connects all these different apps together, and it's just super helpful in marketing or in operations or in customer success or pretty much any other area of any business. And the fact that we can use Make for all this stuff frees up my time to be able to just focus on the content and frees up my team's time to also help improve the content and improve the products, which are fundamentally the only thing that our business really cares about. Anyway, if any of that sounds interesting, then you can start using Make for free with their 1-month pro plan, which includes 10,000 operations. If you check out the link in the video description, you can sign up and then you can explore all the different automations that you can build. So thank you so much, Make, for sponsoring this video. Key idea number 2, the infancy trap. So here is a fun quote. Sarah says, "I hate to beat a dead horse, but what if I want to do the technical work in my business? What if I don't want to do anything else but that?" Michael says, "Then for God's sake," I said as emphatically as I dared, "get rid of your business and get rid of it as quickly as you can, because you can't have it both ways. You can't have your pie and eat it too." Wink. You can't ignore the financial accountabilities, the marketing accountabilities, the sales and administrative accountabilities. You can't ignore your future employees' need for leadership, for purpose, for responsible management, for effective communication, for something more than just a job which their sole purpose is to support you doing your job. Let alone what your business needs from you if it's to thrive. That you understand the way a business works, that you understand the dynamics of a business, cash flow, growth, customer sensitivity, competitive sensitivity, and so forth. He says, if all you wanted from a business of your own is the opportunity to do what you did before you started your business, get paid more for it and have more freedom to come and go, your greed, I know that sounds harsh, but that's what it is, your self-indulgence will eventually consume both you and your business. Ugh, this really hit me hard the first time I read it, and it sort of slots a lot of things into place now that I'm reading it again while filming this video. Because I see this happening a lot. Now that I've become a bit of a small business guru, shall we say, myself, where other entrepreneurs come to me and ask me for advice on how they grow their business from 0 to 10K a month or 10K to 100K a month, you know, all that kind of stuff. I see this happening a lot where people start a business because they think that starting a business is their ticket to financial freedom, or is their ticket to like being able to do what they want when they want and all that kind of stuff. And then they come up against the reality that actually running a business is about a lot more than just doing the thing that you enjoy doing. It's about all of the other stuff. And you can find a way to enjoy doing all of the other stuff, but there is quite a lot of it. And so you have to sort of be ready for that when you start the journey. So anyway, what is the infancy trap? Well, Michael talks about how there are basically 3 stages to building a business. There is infancy, adolescence, and maturity. Now the infancy stage, and this is where you'll get stuck if you're the technician, and during this phase, the owner is the technician, and the owner is also basically the business. The business's priority is to produce something that the owner enjoys making, like pies or YouTube videos or websites, whatever the thing might be. But then depending on how successful you are, at a certain point, there is more work to do than you as the owner physically have the capacity to do that work. And the infancy stage ends when the owner realizes that there's no way he or she can do all of that themselves. And at this point, this is when we start to need to sort of outsource the role of being the technician and introduce the business entrepreneur and the manager. And what Michael Gerber says is that at this stage, a business will either completely die or it will move on to the next phase. And a key takeaway here, which I think about on a weekly basis, is the idea that if you want your business to grow as the owner, you cannot be working in your business. You need to work on your business. It's so easy to let the work of working in the business consume all of the time, and to spend none of that time being the entrepreneur or the manager, and instead just focusing on being the technician. Michael says, if you want to work in a business, get a job in somebody else's business, but don't go to work in your own. Because while you're working, while you're answering the telephone, while you're baking pies, while you're cleaning the windows and the floors, while you're doing it, there is something much more important that isn't getting done. And it's the work you're not doing, the strategic work, the entrepreneurial work that will lead your business forward, that will give you the life you've not yet known. He says to Sarah that you can't just play the role of the technician and ignore the roles of the entrepreneur and the manager simply because you're unprepared to play them. Because the moment you chose to start a small business, Sarah, you unwittingly chose to play a significantly larger game than any game you'd ever played before. And to play this new game called building a small business that actually works, your entrepreneur needs to be coaxed out, nourished, and given the room she needs to expand. And your manager needs to be supported as well so she can develop her skill at creating order and translating the entrepreneurial vision into actions that can be efficiently manifested in the real world. Anything less than that will eventually push you to the brink of disaster and finally over the edge. because a small business simply demands that we do it, or the business will shrivel on the vine. So we start off in infancy, where it's sort of just you doing all the stuff. Then we move into adolescence, which is the point where you decide to get some help. And then maturity is when the owner of the business develops business knowledge. More on that in a little bit. Quick heads up, by the way, if you would like to read summaries of other books, then you should definitely check out Shortform. There will be an affiliate link with a 20% discount in the video description. They're not sponsoring this, but that is an affiliate link. I've been using them for years. It's an amazing service that summarizes over 1,000 nonfiction books. And you might like to also check out their brand new podcast guides feature, which is pretty sick. So if you like books, you like learning, and you want to do it in a time-efficient way, you should definitely check out Shortform. All right, key idea number 3, the systems strategy. Now, there's a cool story that Michael talks about in the book, which is about the founding of McDonald's, which goes all the way back to 1952. Now, there was a guy called Ray Kroc, and he sold milkshake machines. But one day, he rocked up to a hamburger stand that was run by 2 school kids, and he was amazed by how quickly and efficiently and consistently they were making the hamburgers. And importantly, he noticed that anyone else could rock up to the stand and make hamburgers in exactly the same way. And so Ray decided to go into partnership with these 2 kids and decided to franchise this system of making hamburgers, and that was ultimately the birth of McDonald's. Now, what does that have to do with a small business? Because we're not trying to be the next McDonald's. But what Michael Gerber says in the book is to think of your business as though it were the prototype for 5,000 more just like it. This is weird. This was a key unlock for me when it came to my YouTube channel and what I realized I was missing with my first business and how we're approaching every entrepreneurial venture moving forward. Imagining that we are trying to create the next McDonald's, and the goal is to have a clear system that delivers results for the customer that does not rely on people. The thing about McDonald's, right, is that everything is so operationalized and streamlined. You could go to any McDonald's basically anywhere in the world, but you're still getting an identical experience. The burgers still taste the same, the milkshakes still broadly taste the same with some cultural variations and all that stuff. But they can put anyone with like a modicum of intelligence into that role, and because there is a system to follow, a step-by-step set of instructions, the business really succeeds. And there's a quote that I really like here from the book, which is, the question you need to keep asking yourself is, how can I give my customer the results he wants systematically rather than personally? Put another way, how can I create a business whose results are systems dependent rather than people dependent? So in Sarah's case, when it comes to the bakery, how do we create systems around the baking of pies so that anyone can bake the pies, rather than it being reliant on Sarah's talent, innate talent as a baker? This is a thing that hospitals do a lot of. And really, a lot of medical training is based around how do you systemize the delivery of healthcare. You would think that, a doctor has to be really good. But actually, the difference in outcomes for patients between a really good doctor and a doctor who is less good, i.e., there's that quote, what do you call the person who came bottom of their medical school? Doctor. It's like the same thing, right? Like whether or not you got like 53% and just scraped a pass in your medical school exams, or whether you got 100% and put in hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of work, months of work, years of work, you're still the same doctor at the end of the day. And there's not much of a difference in patient outcomes between a bottom of med school doctor versus a top of med school doctor, unless you go into like super niche territory. But like that aside, it's the system that delivers the results. I worked in medicine for 2 years. Mostly what I was doing was following guidelines. These are the antibiotic guidelines for this sort of infection. These are the management guidelines for this sort of early pregnancy bleeding. These are the guidelines for this sort of elderly care that needs to go to a care home, that needs occupational therapy and physiotherapy. Everything had guidelines. And this is actually a very good thing. You do not want a healthcare system that is reliant on the individual talents of individual doctors. You want a healthcare system where the system delivers the result, because doctors swap in and out. A doctor might be sick. A doctor might decide to quit medicine and become a YouTuber. You want the system to continue to work regardless of who the individuals are inside it. Obviously, they have to go through med school and have like a baseline level of knowledge, but then they can operate that system. And it's sort of the same thing when it comes to a business. We want to try and build a business where we create systems that create the results rather than it being reliant on the genius of people. Obviously, this is harder in creative industries, but there is a book called Creativity Inc., which is about Pixar, where he talked, like, I can't remember who's the author, but he talks about Pixar's system for creativity. The way that we do this in our business is that I think about this a lot. I think, okay, what does the systemized version of creating one of our YouTube videos look like? What's the sort of method that we're following? What is the SOP, the standard operating principle? What does SOP stand for? Standard operating principles, right? Procedure. Standard operating procedures, yeah, good point. What is the SOP, the standard operating procedure, that if we were to take anyone smart, they would be able to come in to our business, look at our Notion page, read through our SOPs, our standard operating procedures, or our playbooks, it's another word for it, and be able to be like, okay, this is how we construct an Ali Abdaal YouTube video. You'll notice that like the editing on my videos is like fairly consistent, but we actually have multiple editors. But the editors are following a generalized SOP, a system, And that's the system that we teach students in our part-time YouTuber Academy. Because I realized after reading this book that, wait a minute, if Pixar can systemize the idea of creating a freaking bang of film, I can probably systemize the process of creating a YouTube video. Yes, of course, there's still room for creativity and sparkle and jazz from, the people in the team that are doing the work. And for me, I'm riffing a lot when I do videos. I don't really follow a word-for-word script, but I do a lot of riffing. But it's all based on the constraints of a system. And having that unlock, that realization was a massive thing that really helped this YouTube channel scale. And now a big part of what we do in our business, we've got like 22 team members, is we are building playbooks and systems around the things that we're trying to do. There is another good book that's a sort of companion to this called Get Scalable by a chap called Ryan Dice, who has recently become a friend and mentor. That's sort of like the E-Myth Revisited 2.0, but really the whole point, the whole like unlock is don't think of you as being you, the business owner, as being the one doing the creative work of the business. Think of the business as a product almost, where you want to create a set of step-by-step instructions or playbooks or SOPs. And he talks through a bunch of different ways of doing this. And you can find loads of videos on YouTube from other entrepreneurs who've made videos about how they create playbooks or SOPs within their own business. And that's really the key takeaway here, that the product that you are creating as a business owner is not in fact the product that your customers are buying. The product you're creating as a business owner is the business itself. So don't think of yourself as the person baking the pies or the person creating pies. Think of yourself as the person creating the business, which then makes the pies. I think of myself as an entrepreneur who's building a business that creates things like YouTube videos and books and courses and stuff. Okay, now if you've gotten to this point in this video, it's probably been pretty long. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please, I would love to leave a comment down below, because if you've gotten to this point in the video, you are probably the sort of person that we want to make more business themed videos for. So if you like this, if you've got a business, if you're aspiring to have a business, I'd love to have a few more details of your context in the comments down below. And when it comes to starting or growing your business, what is your single biggest struggle? Because, we've gained a lot of experience, me and my team, over the last 7 years of building this YouTube channel and this business, just several million a year in revenue and profit. And I really want to make more videos about business. I'm going to be sharing those in my newsletter as well in business class, so you can check that out if you want. But I would love for you to leave a comment down below. And if you enjoyed this video and you haven't seen this video over here, this is a video containing a lot of the mistakes that I made in building my businesses over the last 10 plus years. So if you enjoyed this video, you're going to love this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you hopefully in the next video. Bye-bye.